All right, we good to go? Cool. My name is Robbie Burns. I'm the assistant track and field coach and strength and conditioning coach at Butler University down here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Level 2 for sprints, hurdles, and relays, and CSCS certified. I actually started, I'm kind of new in the strength conditioning world. I'll be the first one to tell you. I'm raw here, been doing it for about a year and a half, but started off at Butler as a track and field coach, and then just had the opportunity to advance into the weight room and work with the athletes in there as well. Specifically today, we're talking about speed improvements in the weight room and how we can translate that into our sports. But we're going to be talking just a little bit, obviously, about the translation there, but then how we can use that in our field events as well, our field sports as well. So I also work with lacrosse and softball and tennis and golf. Golf, they're not doing a whole lot of sprinting, so it's not too applicable to them, but the other sports, we've got to have the deceleration, change of direction, that type of thing. So what is speed? I think first we want to have just a great working definition of what speed is, make sure we're all on the same page with that. Speed in its simplest form is the ability to move the body or parts of the body through a given range of motion in the least amount of time. In coaching and what we do, speed is the fastest movement expressed through technique. Okay, so you can blow through a movement, but if it looks like crap, the speed's really irrelevant at that point. Okay, so it's got to be expressed through technique. Speed must not influence technical efficiency. Again, if you're very focused on doing a movement well, right, and we just try to do it fast and we lose the quality of the movement, then the speed is irrelevant there. And increased speed does not always yield an increase in performance. Okay, so again, the efficiency of the movement has to be priority number one before you can add the speed qualities to it. Okay. Another component of speed, when I think of speed, it's just the overall arching component of everything goes into it. Acceleration is one of those qualities. Acceleration, by definition, is the change of velocity divided by the change in time. Okay, and that's the ability to move the body from rest, typically is what we think of in sport, body at rest and accelerating it. But also acceleration can be a body in motion and changing directions, a body going forward and slowing down. Acceleration has many different forms, but for the most part, we're going to be talking about from stop to movement. Okay, and we make sure that we don't confuse acceleration with absolute speed. They're very different components. Okay, absolute speed or max velocity, as we're going to be talking about it, is different from accelerating. Okay, so if you look at the 100-meter dash, right, we're all familiar with the 100-meter dash in track and field. The phases of the 100-meter dash, the way I see them at least, are you have your acceleration phase typically lasting somewhere between 30 and 35 meters. Okay, depending on the age of the athlete, it might be as low as 25. Right, but that's pure acceleration. We're trying to get up to speed. Okay, even the acceleration can be broken down into different phases as well, where you're going to see the first 5 steps of your acceleration. This is for any athlete in any sport. First 5 steps, you're going to accumulate about 85% of your max velocity. First 5 steps is worth about 85% of your max velocity. Okay, so the first 5 steps are absolutely critical. That's our drive phase. Okay, from those first 5 steps, which is going to take 7, 8 meters, somewhere in there, then we have our transitional phase. We're changing from the first 5 power steps, working into standing up into our max velocity posture and our max velocity form. Okay, the dynamics of acceleration, we have factors like step length, okay, the distance between each ground contact, that's going to increase as we accelerate. Step length will increase as we accelerate, going from a shorter step where I might be only covering a meter, okay, in the first couple steps, increase up to 3.5 meters, somewhere in that range. Okay, so that's going to be a progressive acceleration. Your ground contact time, in the first parts of your acceleration, that ground contact time, it's allowed to be a little bit slower. Yes, we are trying to get from point A to point B as fast as possible, but don't spin your wheels, per se, just for the sake of moving fast when you're not accomplishing the goal. So spend more time touching the ground, using the force that you have in your body to propel your body down the track. Okay, so ground contact time goes from slow to fast. Your shin angle with the ground is also a component of the acceleration. Shin angle should progress from a low shin angle, right, very tight to the ground, the knee driving forward out in front of you. And as we stand up, as we get into that transitional phase, that shin angle is going to come up and be more vertical. So you're applying horizontal forces to start, propelling the body forward. When you get into that max velocity phase, the shin angles will be more upright. We're applying more vertical forces into the track. Okay, the velocity is obviously going to increase as we go. This is again talking from body at rest to a body in motion. So the velocity is increasing. Our step frequency, that's the rhythm. Okay, you should be able to hear it. You should be able to see it. The athlete should be able to hear it and feel it as well. So the rhythm of a run, progressing from slow, almost like a slow clap, right? Progressing from a slow to a fast rhythm. And then our heel recovery. Our heel recovery references how high my heel is cycling off the ground and out in front of me. That's going to progress from low to high as well. Again, from applying those horizontal forces, projecting the body forward into the vertical forces that we see at max velocity and max velocity posture. I don't know, how do I start this video? Okay, this is just a block start demonstration for one of my athletes. You can see the low heel recovery, accelerated forces moving down the track. Okay, I wish you had blocks in all your sports. It'd be a lot easier to push the body horizontally. Okay, and as we talked about, acceleration isn't always just in one plane. It's not always from a stop to a start. Okay, so acceleration can be speeding up, as we often think of it, but acceleration is also deceleration. Deceleration is a form of acceleration. So as our athletes are slowing down, as we're putting on the brakes in the weight room, as Coach Aiken was talking about, being able to absorb the load from jumps, okay, that's decelerative properties, and that's slowing down. It's still acceleration, okay? And then changing directions as well, much more applicable to your field sports when they have to cut, when they have to move, when they have to shift directions or shift speeds or any kind of change. Track's very simple. We go straight, we turn left. Love it. Love the simplicity of it. Okay, another component of speed, and this is kind of the tried and true, this is the gold standard, is just max velocity. If we can get our athletes purely faster, that's what it's all about. Okay, speed kills. So max velocity equals distance divided by time, miles per hour, meters per second. Okay, when we're using our velocity-based training in the weight room, that's what we're measuring. It's the maximum velocity of that bar. It's often thought of as a whole body movement, right? How fast can I get from point A to point B, right? But it can also be broken down into individual limbs. So your pitchers, your overhead sports that are throwing, right? We can track the max velocity of that particular limb. If the arm's moving faster, that ball's going to come in faster, right? So we can train those different components of it as well. Again, it's often confused with acceleration, but they're very different. Acceleration has to happen first before max velocity can be attained, okay? Training activities for maximum velocity are going to be getting up to maximum velocity, which is a skill, okay? Running at max velocity is probably the most coordinated movement that the body does. It's probably the most coordinated movement that the body does as far as the timing of the limbs, as far as your central nervous system firing in the right sequence, okay? So it's a skill to be able to get to max velocity. So training involves teaching the athlete to find max velocity and acquire max velocity, as well as maintaining that for short periods of time in training so that we can transfer that into maintaining max velocity for long periods of time, particularly in track with 100-meter dash, 200-meter dash, those short ballistic events, long jump, similar things. So this is a wicket spacing drill. You're going to see my athlete coming in. He's got about a 20-meter acceleration before this video takes place. So he's coming in, he's working his acceleration, he's working up to max velocity, and the wickets are spaced. You can see there's a couple different lanes there. I've got a men's lane and a women's lane for the distance that I want their ground contacts to cover. So the goal is that they're not looking down, they're not eyeballing the track, seeing where they're going to be hitting, but they're upright in a good posture, they're having vertical strikes into the ground, and that they're maintaining that max velocity throughout the entire run. And we go from, you can go ahead and play it. Nice upright posture. He's actively contacting the ground. If you want to cycle through that a couple times, it'd be great. Seeing him come in, hit that max acceleration, max velocity, and work his way through the wickets. Okay. The posture here helps him maintain that force. We're trying to decelerate as little as possible. Anytime we put the foot down into the ground, there's a decelerative force first before an accelerative force can be applied. Okay, so that's where the ground contact time comes into play. If I can limit that time on the ground, we're going to limit the decelerative forces happening. Okay, and finally, speed endurance. This is probably the component of speed that is least active in your field event sports or in your field sports. Okay, very seldom. If you look at, there's so many metrics out there, especially for professional soccer teams, and maybe your university or high school has these abilities as well for GPS tracking. Very rarely in field event sports are your athletes actually getting to max velocity. Very rarely, and if they do, it's for very short periods of time. So speed endurance is less influential on your field sports, but obviously very influential on track and field, where the goal is get to A to B as fast as possible. Okay, so it's that ability to maintain the max velocity. Inevitably, it will turn to deceleration the longer the body goes. I want to point out, and this is a big part of this presentation, it's less dependent on any energy system that we have in our body, and more dependent on the coordination of the limbs, coordination of the movement. Okay, so that's going to fail before the body runs out of energy. So can you train speed endurance? Yeah, you can, but it's going to be more of a neuromuscular training than it is just a fitness training, right? Then training for speed endurance, it involves attempting to maintain max velocity for longer periods of time as we go. Finally, the last component of speed, it's optimal speed. I put up a picture here of my hurdler because I think that event demonstrates optimal speed the best in track and field. So hurdles for the 110s are spaced 9.14 meters apart. Okay, and in those 9.14 meters, my athlete has to get 4 ground contacts in. If I know that his average stride length is 3 meters, 3 meters times 4 ground contacts is 12 meters. And then he's got to condense that into 9.14 meters. So he cannot go max velocity through the hurdles. It's impossible. Okay, so we have to have that optimal speed in order to navigate the hurdles most successfully. Okay. Increasing speed, increasing that max velocity gives you the ability to increase the optimal speed. Okay, so if we can raise the ceiling on max velocity, that gives us the opportunity to raise the ceiling on the optimal speed. That's very sports specific. You know, wide receivers in football, they're not always going all out. They need to time their routes up correctly. You're making a run in soccer, you're rounding the bases in baseball, softball, whatever that might be. Timing of your speed is just as critical. So we want to find what that optimal timing is. And that comes with experience, that comes with being around the sport, okay? The goal is that we increase max velocity so that optimal speed can be increased as well. Optimal speed is important when the coordination has to be there to be able to handle that max velocity, right? So controlling that speed that you have, okay? This comes with change of direction movements as well. If I'm moving to my right, I know I've got to decelerate a little bit in order to control that speed to move to my left. So what is the optimal speed going into that cut, going into that change of direction? Okay. So our main means and development, main means and methods of developing max velocity. Okay, if we're talking about max velocity, then we got to train max velocity. That means your intent, your output of energy has to be between 90 and 100% of effort. Has to be. Anything below that, then we're just training to get fit, right? So 90 to 100% of best performance. The distance of max velocity, depending on the training age, depending on the time of year, is going to be somewhere between 10 and 30 meters, right? So fly 10s is something that we time all the time throughout the season. I want to see how fast my athletes can cover 10 meters. And so I'm going to give them the same run-in. They got 30 meters of run-in, and we're timing them using some timing gates for 10 meters. Hopefully, I'm seeing that time drop throughout the year, right? But as we pointed out before in Coach Aiken's session, I'm going to put different stimulus on the body, so maybe they're not feeling it one day, and their time's going to be a little bit slower. That's okay. That's okay. But we want to give the athletes that feedback so they know, yeah, I'm feeling good today, Coach. I can see that in my time on that 10, okay? And that can extend up to 30 meters. 30 meters, 35, depending on the athlete age, training age that you have. Really, we're looking somewhere between that 1 and 4 second range. So that's going to be more of the determinant than the actual distance. And the recovery when we're doing max intensity work, max velocity work, has to be substantial. Okay, we just talked about how the neuromuscular control, the coordination of the movement is going to be the determining factor in maintaining that speed. So if I'm not giving my athletes ample enough rest, then the coordination is going to go out the window. It's not an energy system component, it's a coordination component. Give their minds, give their bodies time to recover before we're going to do a max velocity run again. Right? And then total volume for the session, somewhere between 200 and 500 meters, 200, 500 yards, whatever works best for you and your sport. But again, this is not a conditioning session. This is a max velocity, max intent work. Okay, so we're not trying to run the athletes into the ground. I always see, coaches say, hey, Coach Burns, I want to do a max velocity session with the team. I want you to work on their speed as a team. Okay, sweet. So I come in at the beginning of practice. The athletes are fresh. We work some speed. We work very high quality work. Then I stick around and watch practice. And at the end, they're going to do a big conditioning session. We're just going to run gassers. Well, the body's going to remember the last stimulus that you put on it. So if you're running gassers at the end, if you're smoking your athletes at the end, the body's going to be in a fatigue state. And I don't want it in a fatigue state if we're working pure max velocity. Okay. The training density for max velocity work, again, depending on the sport. So apply this to your clients, apply this to your athletes, whatever that might be. Training density, as a sprint coach, I'm looking at about once every 4 days we're going to be hitting max velocity work. Okay. Once every 5 days, once every 6 days for a sport that doesn't require as much max V work. Okay, but somewhere in that range, you've got to be hitting high intensities for a couple of reasons. One, train the neuromuscular demands of high intensity sprinting. Okay, but two, there's only one way to get better at a skill. That's by doing it, right? And three, let's prevent injuries. Let's prevent injuries. If the body's used to going that high intensity, then we're much less likely to pull a hamstring, tweak something here and there. So let's train effectively, right? How we couple those workouts, we'll talk about a little bit later, but vitally important. Little graph shows you kind of the different areas that we're training in speed. The top two, I about shined that in your eyes, I'm sorry. The top two, extensive tempo and intensive tempo, that's going to be more your conditioning training, okay? Not really what we're talking about in terms of max velocity work, but anything from speed, 20 to 80 meters, down to speed endurance, 80 to 150 meters, that's a lot. That's on the high end, so that's going to be more your 400-meter sprinters, that type of thing. But then we're talking about the distance we're going, the objective of the workout, the energy systems we're training. You can tell the intent is always 90 to 100%. Okay, your rest intervals between reps and between sets, 3 to 5 minutes between reps, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 1 minute. Okay, it depends what you're working on energy system-wise, but the content or the intent of this slide is, hey, it's got to be fast for training speed. It's got to be fast for training speed. And then total volume of the session over here on the side. The other component of speed is strength, right? Those two have to work hand in hand. We're all strength conditioning coaches here, so let's talk about strength, make sure we're on the same page there. Strength is power. Power is work divided by time, or force times distance traveled divided by time. Okay, the rate at which you're able to, the rate at which work is done, or the rate at which energy is transferred. Okay, so I always reference the force velocity curve. This is where I base a lot of my training off of. I know as sprinters that are doing max velocity work every 4 days, we're spending a lot of time on this high velocity speed, strength, and speed level. So when I go into the weight room and I take my sprinters in the weight room, I got to get the rest of that force velocity curve. We spend a lot of time on our power, our strength, speed, and our maximal strength work. Okay, and that's just what's worked best for me. What's worked best for me. A sport specificity, track, very similar to swimming in the demands. But swimming's always working under the resistance of water. Okay, so they're spending a lot more time up in here working against that resistance. When I get swimmers in the weight room, I'm hitting the velocity. I'm hitting speed. I need to be able to train all vectors of that curve, make sure it's able to transfer into the sport. Okay. We're going to go on to the next slide, but we're going to talk about some bar speed and some bar velocities for these different ranges right here. I want to make sure it's pointed out that these bar velocities are for your full range of motion strength movements. So squat and bench. Okay, full range of motion. This isn't partials. This isn't Olympic movements. This is full range of motion strength movements. So start off with absolute strength. So this is going to be the absolute top of the force velocity curve where you're dealing with 1 RM work, right? Very similar to max velocity sprinting. 1 RM work or max strength work is ideally trained from the 90 to 100% range. We all know you can only hit that for a certain amount of time, a certain limit of time. So we got to make sure that when we do it, it's intentful, it has quality, it has purpose. Okay. The main goal is force development, maximal strength, maximum muscular contractions are happening, and then we're looking at less than 0.5 meters per second on your bar velocity. So very slow movement. Okay, very slow movement in the weight room. How does that transfer to speed? I don't know if it does. I don't know if it does besides force output. Okay, so actual maxing out in the weight room, absolute strength in the weight room, maybe it does have a direct correlation, or maybe it's just force application. Okay, we're going to try to uncover that a little bit. Your speed strength, or I'm sorry, your strength speed. The focus is on power development. It's got a strength bias to it, a strength emphasis to it. So I'm looking at somewhere in the 2 to 5 rep scheme, 4 to 9 sets of that. It's near maximum to moderate muscular contractions. The secondary emphasis, the second thing I'm looking for as a coach is the velocity on the bar. Okay, so 0.75 to 1.0 meters per second on the bar, but that's less important than the force I'm putting through the bar. Okay, and your power is maximized at 60 to 70% of your 1 RM. The range is from 60 to 80% when you're training strength speed, but you're going to get most power maximized at 60 to 70%. Speed strength is our next component. All right, we're going to skip power. We're going to come back to power, I promise. That's kind of important here. Speed strength does have a power development focus, but with a speed bias this time. So now my primary focus is the velocity on the bar, with my secondary focus being the amount of weight on the bar, the intensity on the bar. Velocity takes precedence over force. Maximum power numbers that we measure in watts, that's achieved between 50 and 60% of the 1 RM. Again, this range goes down to 40 to 60%. We're dealing with 50 to 60% to get the optimized power out of the movement. We should terminate that set if peak power drops below 10%, and we're looking somewhere between 1.0 and 1.3 meters per second on our bar speed. That's the mean bar speed, not the max velocity on the bar speed. Okay, so mean velocity there. Finally, max velocity. I didn't have enough room to put force velocity curve in there, but this is lying right there. Right? So this is our max velocity or speed work in the weight room. We're focusing on reactive and elastic strength. So a lot of your ballistic movements. Can we take the standard squat that we've been doing, and can we unload it and accelerate the bar even faster? Right? Can we do a jump squat with the bar on our back? Can we hold some dumbbells as goblet? Can we hold dumbbells at the side? Can we use bands as assistance training to get the bar moving as fast as possible? Right? So since velocity is the single most important variable that we're going to have here, that's the main focus. That's what we're trying to exploit. The high elastic reactive fiber, so the stretch shortening cycle comes into play here. Can we train that? Can we get our athletes to be able to respond to the stimulus of the ground, of reactive force, and produce force off of that? Okay. We're looking at greater than 1.3 meters per second of bar velocity here. It's got to be moving fast. It's got to be moving quick. Okay. And then just a note that we want to caution that spinal loading and lower limb movements for our youth athletes, make sure that the movement is quality before you try making it explosive and ballistic. Right? If you've got an athlete that arches their back every time they're doing a squat, we probably shouldn't try doing a squat jump from here. Not a very good movement. Okay, so make sure that you've taught how to brace the spine, how to load, how to accelerate the force properly before we start trying to do it ballistically. Okay, start from the strength focus, work your way to a velocity focus. And finally, max power. Okay, this is kind of the sweet spot with what we're talking about. At the end of the day, you ask any sport coach, you say, Coach, what do you want with your athletes? Well, I want my athletes to be faster. I want to be more powerful. Okay, all right, we can do that. Less likely to be injured. All right, now I've got a basis for what I want to do moving forward. I like this picture because her hair is awesome, but it's actually a terrible shot put throw. This is one of her worst ones. It's coming off the middle finger. I won't talk about that. She was mad that I put that in the slide. But so the load is going to display the greatest amount of power, and that's right around your 60% of your 1 RM. that's where we're going to see the best power numbers in terms of work divided by time. So I can move the bar with the most force in the least amount of time, somewhere in the 60% range. 0.8 meters per second of bar velocity, and you're only looking at 2 to 6 reps a set. Okay, 2 to 6 reps a set. Again, the coordination factor comes into play here. Can I still move the bar efficiently and in a meaningful manner? So how does that all add up, right? So on this graph, you can see our velocity line is this red diagonal line going through. This is on a 537-pound squatter. So I don't know if you have any of those in your weight room. I don't have a ton at Butler, right? But 537-pound squatter. As the weight increases, right, the velocity is going to decrease. Okay, what we're really looking here is our arch, okay, showing us the power displayed in watts for each rep. I'm sorry, for each weight that's being moved here. Okay, so now we take what we just talked about in terms of our absolute speed, our speed strength, our strength speed, and our max force, or our max strength. We're able to put this on a graph and chart where we're at in these different things. Do I want high velocity? Well, then I'm going to be training the absolute speed that's in that 20 to 40% range of the 1 RM. Okay, we're going to get high velocities, but we're still not very high on our force curve here. Okay, somewhere along this area is where you're at on a force curve, but peak force is right there, so we're still a ways away. Right, our speed strength component, 40 to 60% of your 1 RM. We're still focusing on the velocity of the bar, but there's power development characteristics there. 60 to 80% is our strength speed, and 80 to 100% is our absolute max strength. Okay? What is the focus of the workout? I think we need to ask ourselves that every day. So when an athlete says, "Coach, why are we doing this?" I got to have an answer for it. We're doing this because X, Y, Z. Okay? I found I'm in a fun spot at Butler where my athletes are all smarter than me, and they thrive off information and knowledge. So when they ask me, "Coach, why are we doing this?" If I come up with some BS answer, they're going to see right through it. They're pharmacists and they're future CEOs, and they're way smarter than I am. So I've got to be able to have a reason behind everything that we do. Another graph here, just kind of map out the different zones that we're working in. We see our max power right here around 60% and divided into the speed emphasis on the max velocity and the speed strength, and the strength emphasis divided on the strength, speed, and absolute strength side of things. I'm more than happy to send this to you guys. That's just a nice little chart that I keep posted up in my office all the time. So when I'm programming, I'm able to see, all right, what are we really trying to focus on? Let's make sure I'm sticking to, right? Stick to your columns, stay in your lane. Our means and methods of strength development. A couple different types of lifts here, a couple different types of movements here. Our Olympic movements, which again, we've been talking about our strength movements or our static movements this whole time. But our Olympic movements, the main goal of those is to increase the rate of force development. How quickly can I produce that force? Right? That's the focus of our Olympic movements. Your clean, your snatch, your jerk, and the derivatives that work off of those 3 major lifts. Okay? Our static lifts, that's your bench, your squat, your deadlifts. Focus on absolute strength and postural qualities. Okay? You hear it all the time that if you do your static lifts correctly and with the right intent, you never need to do a crunch in your life. Your core work should be stabilized if you do these static lifts correctly. Okay? Deadlift, horizontal, and vertical pressing. Okay, it can be upper body as well. Our ballistic lifts, that's more on the speed strength and absolute speed side of the force velocity curve. But that you can take your simple movements like your squat or your bench, and now we're adding assistance or repetition to them or quick reactive forces off of it to enhance those elastic capabilities. Repeated presses, repeated jerks, loaded jumps. Okay. And finally, your bodybuilding lifts. These are the look good lifts. These are feel good lifts, right? So the focus there is endocrine and energy system development, which in turn is going to promote hypertrophy. We want a more resilient athlete. We want a bigger hammer to hit the nail. whatever you want to say to it, enhanced capabilities for your Olympic, your static, your ballistic lifts, right? Doing these bodybuilding lifts will help the other ones, right, come along and increase and be more efficient. And then also as well as injury prevention. When I think of sport specificity, I've never played lacrosse in my life, right? But I work with the lacrosse team, so I'm always asking the coach. I'm going out to practice. I'm watching games. I'm seeing, all right, what are the athletes that these female, or what are the movements that these females are doing day in and day out on the lacrosse field? And I'm trying to see that. Think, all right, what are they most prevalent to injure here? What's most likely to happen? Then my sport specificity in the weight room is geared towards injury prevention in the sport. Okay, and that can take on the form of bodybuilding lifts. Some of it got cut off. That's okay. We'll walk through it a little bit. This is my macro plan. This is exactly what I do from day one when they get on campus, which is our general strength phase right here, through our general strength 2, a max phase, Christmas break, your competition 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, competition 6 if you get to nationals, but I've only had one of those. All right, so this lays it out for me, and I've got it in my Excel document where you know, my volumes and intensities auto-populate in here, and it just helps me kind of make sure that I'm staying on track with everything, right? But I always put in notes of what I'm looking for in that specific phase, and this carries over to what I do on the track, and what I do on the track carries over into what I do in the weight room with my track athletes. Okay, so we've got 5 main emphases here. Hypertrophy is one of them, or you know, ability to work capacity. I'd put in that category. I'm going to rank those on a 1 to 5 scale, what's most important to me at the time. So early in the year, throughout the summer, hypertrophy is a high focus for me. Once they get back to campus, then strength is my focus, right? As strength de-emphasizes, still stays high at a 4, we're not competing yet, then max strength becomes my focus. That's going to be, as you can see down here, high intensity work, okay? Then finally, power is the 4th column here, and this is peaking on the bottom row, right? So peaking, I don't care about it at all through June, July, August, September, October. It's not relevant. We're not trying to peak. I'm trying to train, trying to get better, right? And as you go throughout the year, I'm adjusting my priorities, my focuses, and they're always shifting and moving around, okay? Once we hit our max strength, and we're good on that. Feel good about those numbers that my guys hit, my girls hit. I'm going to leave it alone for a little bit and train over here, okay? I see a sign that max strength might be coming down, might be dwindling. Come back, hammer that nail a little bit, feel good about max strength, move on and keep training the athletes. Weight room performance is not indicative of speed performance out on the track, okay? Their times can be increasing and their strength numbers can be going down. Who am I to argue about that, okay? And then we're always tracking the volume and the intensity as well, okay? So you can see high intensity bouts with these blocks here. My volume is tracked through the lines. So we're putting together that whole year plan. It's our macro cycle. When we're putting together that whole year plan, we want to have a few thoughts in mind for it, okay? Make sure that we're hitting some key points. Your time allocation, how much time do you have to spend with your athletes? I'm in a fortunate position where I get to do the sport coaching and the strength and conditioning coaching for my track athletes, so I get them year-round. They can't get enough of me. So how much time are you spending in the preparation phase, in the competition phase, and your transitional phase? Okay. Ideally, the preparation and competition phases are about equal in length. If you know you're working with a club team and it's only a 2-month season over the summer, well, you probably don't need them from September through May before you hit that summer season. It's great to have them, but your actual intent on your preparation phase really only needs to be about 2 months. Okay. Most of us are working with college sports. Okay, you know those seasons are going to take, or high school sports, you know those seasons are going to take 4 or 5 months sometimes. So your preparation for that season needs to be equal in length. Our training characteristics. This is how I work. It's not necessarily how you have to work, depending on the training age of the athlete, depending on the experience of the athlete. But I work from a general activity standpoint to a specific activity standpoint. That's obviously very specific for sport, but we can still work acceleration mechanics without blocks. We can still work acceleration without me shooting a gun 30 times in a practice. Okay, it doesn't need to be as specific. We can still focus on the general qualities of acceleration, the general principles there, before I get too specific and start giving them numbers on their shin angle and that type of thing. Okay, I'm going to start with my simple movements. Within the sport, move to complex movements. One movement that just about every sport does is running, right? So we've got to make sure, one, I learn how to, and I teach my athletes how to run properly before I teach them to run fast and work on max velocity things. So I'm going to start with the simplest, work to more complex. Complex, when we're talking about running, can include cutting, can include change directions, can include stopping and backpedaling, okay? Can include jumping out of a run, anything like that. And then I work from capacity to power, much like Coach Aiken does with his athletes as well. I need to build up this resiliency to do work, okay? If I know that I can run, 3,000 meters in a session, right? I've got to start somewhere first. We got to start at 1,000, work up to 1,500, work up to 2,000. Okay, gradually work our way up to what's that main focus, what's that key performance indicator, right, for your athletes, for your specific sport. Okay, and then a training sequence for me, again, I mentioned this, I work my acceleration at the beginning of the year, then we progress to speed work, max velocity work, then we progress to speed endurance. That's not the same for every track and field coach. Some will work directly backwards of that, okay? And then I'd work from aerobic to anaerobic capabilities. So we're going to start off with a lot of longer runs, start off with a lot of volume-based training before I get more specific. You can flip that on its head if you want. You can work the exact opposite. And then one thing I preach all the time is the win principle, right? We're all coaches. We all want to win. But in this case, win is what's important right now. What's important now, okay? When we're looking at the time of year that we're in, do I need to be running my fastest? Do I need to be setting PRs? Do I need to be whatever that is in October, in November? No, not yet. Let's think about what's important now, okay? So I look at where do we want to be at the end of the year? This comes with goal setting, right? Long-term and short-term goals. Where do we want to be at the end of the year? And then how can I work back off of that? If I've got an athlete and they say, Coach, I want to run 47.5 in May at conference. Like, okay, run 47.5 in May, that means we're going to have to be running these type of workouts in April. In order to do these type of workouts in April, I know that in March I've got to address XYZ issue, okay? So I start from where they want to be at the end of the year and work our way back, or where they want to be at the end of their career and work their way back, okay? Allow that time to think about development within your program and how you want to get from where you are now to where you're going. So for me, that's thinking about what's important now. Our mesocycle considerations, we're looking somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks. I do 4-week blocks, but that's depending on the breaks in the school year, right? I know that I can't see them the week of finals, and they've got 3 weeks off for Christmas. There's my perfect 4-week block. Before that week of finals, I've got a week and a half with them after Thanksgiving break. Kind of just gets messy in there. So we can adjust that as needed, right? Don't get married to a 4-week scheme or a 6-week scheme that can change all the time. Your rest and recovery opportunities, this is when we're thinking about, okay, a deload week or a week where I'm really trying to amp it up, always making sure that as hard as we train, we have to recover just as hard. Okay, we have to recover just as hard. So if you're putting all this energy into the weight room and all this energy into your workouts on the track and all this energy into your practices, you better be spending a significant amount of energy recovering the body so it's ready for the next session, okay? And that comes with nutrition, that comes with sleep, that comes with hydration, that comes with a whole gamut of things, the psychological approach. I know that during finals week, I'm not going to get good quality out of my athletes. So we keep our sessions short, we keep them very intentful, and they get out and get on their way, right? Get the work done that you need and get them out of there. The specific needs and the chronological fit toward long-term or incremental goals, that has to do with where you want to be and working our way backwards. Okay, and then we have a couple of different styles here. A block or rotational scheme. Rotational scheme is within the mesocycle. I'm going to address 3 things, right? 3, maybe 4 things. I'm just going to cycle through 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 throughout that mesocycle. Okay, so we know that we're not adding a huge different stress to the body. The body's used to the training that you're going to put on it on that given day, whereas a block scheme takes several mesocycles, right? And we could be jumping from max power down to, or max strength down to power, back up to strength speed, down to speed strength, back up to, you can move all over the place with that. The one thing with the rotational scheme, or I'm sorry, the block scheme, if they're 2 different energy systems, if it's completely on other sides of the spectrum, you might want to think about having a transitional phase in there where we're kind of getting the body accustomed to the new training stimulus that you're about to put on that, okay? If you're going from big 1 RM, 100% intensity, and then you're going to go back to a lot of hypertrophy work, a lot of volume work, and you're ease them into that a little bit. Then your microcycle considerations, microcycles go into our mesocycles. I stick with a 7-day microcycle because it's easy. I know my meets are on Saturdays, and it's very structured that way. But depending on your sport, you can work up to about a 10-day microcycle. My scheme for the 7-day microcycle is 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 2 days off. Okay, so that's Monday, Tuesday we train hard, Wednesday we recover, Thursday, Friday we train hard, Saturday, Sunday we recover. That's our out-of-season program. When we're in season, I move up a rest day, right? Because we're training hard on Saturday. We're competing on Saturday. 2 major considerations with your microcycles are the effective construction of each individual session, right? We know we got to warm up. We know we got to have technical proficiency. We know we've got to train some sort of energy system. And we know we've got to cool down and recover the body, right? And then the combination and sequencing of sessions, back-to-back sessions, or within a session to promote the body's response to that energy system training. Okay, so that could come in the form of compatible training. Compatible training is when the two successive sessions kind of go hand in hand, right? So if I'm going to train speed endurance on my Monday, then I'm still going to train speed endurance on Tuesday, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper. If it was an easier session of speed endurance on Monday, I can go a harder session of speed endurance on Tuesday, or vice versa. A hard session of speed endurance Monday, easier session of speed endurance on Tuesday, so that you're able to apply 2 days of stimulus, 2 sessions of stimulus to the same energy system, and then you need to recover it, okay? Complementary training, on the other hand, is when they're going to be more of a high-low scheme, okay? So if I'm going to train acceleration on Monday, I'm going to come back and we're not going to do anything fast on Tuesday. We're going to do the slow grind workout, the high volume type workout, the carnage on the track type workout, right? And same thing when we're working in the weight room. If I'm training fast on the track, you better believe we're going to come in the weight room, we're going to put an emphasis on the Olympic movements, the quick bar speed movements. If I'm slow out on the track, then sure, let's get under a barbell and let's squat heavy, or let's deadlift heavy. When we're slow on the track, we're slow in the weight room. We're fast on the track, we're fast in the weight room. And then obviously your rest and recovery that goes into that, just as important, For your individual session, considerations for that, warm up. Make sure what we're doing in our warm up is preparing the athlete for what we're doing out on the track, okay? This should be very specific to that. I've got a general warm up that I stick with that we do every single day. Then depending on the session, depending on what we're working out on that day, right, there might be some added components to the warm-up. If it's a very fast ballistic day, I need to progress from my slow movements to my fast ballistic movements. I need to get the body ready to go, okay? Whereas a slow day, a recovery day, just mobilize, keep the body in that state that it needs to be at. Your technical work is typically going to come before your power work, just because of the central nervous system fatigue that we talked about before. Make sure that they have the opportunity to process what's going on, and they can be technically sound in that. Then your power work, for me in the weight room, that comes with my Olympic lifts. We do Olympic lifts every day, whether it's a jerk, a snatch, or a clean. My strength and static lifts are going to be those, the squat, deadlift, single leg, double leg variations of those. Then we're always cooling down, again, getting ready for the next session the following day. Your power output monitoring, again, depending on the school you're at, we're looking into getting some velocity-based training in our weight room, but you might not have those abilities, okay? So what are your monitoring options? Right now, I've got a questionnaire on the bottom of my lift card. How many hours of sleep did you get last night? What was your RPE for the session today? What did you have for breakfast for my morning groups? Okay, I'm asking those things and putting that into a spreadsheet so I can see, Jamie had a terrible day of training today. I wonder why. Well, she got 3 hours of sleep, didn't have breakfast, and no wonder this session was a 10 when everyone else was a 4, right? So then with that, we're able to manipulate the workout, we're able to change the workout and meet the needs of the athlete on that individual day, okay? The number one monitoring tool, communication. Talking to your athletes. Hey, how we doing? So simple, but it goes such a long way, right? So simple, it goes such a long way. There's no better master of an athlete's body than the athlete, okay? They know how they feel. They know when it's going to be a good day. I show up to the track, and I always fake it when I get to the track as a coach. Like, oh man, track's fast today, guys. Track's fast today. We're gonna have a good day, right? Then the athlete might come to you and say, it's not happening today. I'm sore. This is bothering me. This is twinge, whatever it might be. Okay, now what? How do we take this information and move forward? Okay, so our absolute strength we talked about. That less than 0.5 meters per second. Strength speed, 0.75 to 1.0. Max power, you guys can read right there. You're great at that. Our Olympic movements, 1.8 to 2.5 meters per second. It's typically what we're looking at for those movements. Then max velocity sprinting, 9.7 to 10.8 meters per second. It's a pretty big disconnect right there. Okay, so what are we doing in our sessions to get somewhere between 2.5 and 9.7 meters per second? Okay, that's where I think a lot of the disconnect happens. Is what we're doing in the weight room actually getting us faster? I don't know if it is. I know what we're doing in the weight room is make us more resilient and give us the opportunity to run faster, but is there a direct correlation? With our traditional movements, even Olympic lifts, they only go 2.5 meters per second, maybe up to 3 if you're going super light. Okay, maybe 3 meters per second if you're going super light. So how do we connect those dots? Okay, plyometric movements. Okay, coach talked about jumping, 2 times 40 jumps a day, or every other, 2 times 40 jumps a week. Yeah, plyometrics, add those into your workout. Start from simple, work to complex. See the resiliency of the athlete. If you're working with volleyball players that jump 100 times a practice, you probably don't need to add as much volume into your volume of jumping into your programming. Okay, for my sprinters that we just run straight, we just turn left and we run straight, I can do a lot of plyometric work in the weight room. Okay, whether that's in contrast to the lift that we're doing or post-activation potentiation, French contrast, whatever that might be, add that into your program. So we're moving the body, moving limbs of the body at a faster meter per second than you traditionally are in the weight room, but not quite as fast as max velocity, right? Connecting those dots. Resisted sprints. We do a ton of resistance sprints. I don't care if it's with a sled and you're pushing, a sled and you're pulling. Okay, if you've got, we've got the Exergenie. It's a pulley system that we hook up to a wall, and it's just, you can change the tension on that. So I'm able to get 10 athletes in there, hook up a harness. I know Jane's going to be at whatever resistance that might be, and then Mike's a big powerhouse, so we're going to crank up the resistance on him. I'm going to get the same meters per second out of it. So I can control those variables. Assisted sprints as well. We hook up to bungees, and I want to work on overspeed. If I want to get to 9.6 meters per second, right, I've got to do some variations of that. I've got to train them at 10.6 meters per second. How do I do that when they're not capable of it? Assist them, right? If you could follow your athletes with a big old fan behind them when they're running, they move pretty fast. We love tailwinds, right? But since we don't have that luxury, we've got to hook up bungees or hook up some way, downhill running even. Continuous jumps, counter movement jumps, any kind of loading parameters for those that you have, depending on the resources, play around with them, right? Play around with them, explore, be a master of your own programming. Bounding, and then my favorite is med ball work. We do a ton of med ball work. I want to see if the force characteristics we've been building up, the power capabilities that we've been building up, can be displayed through movement. Okay? We've got a big concrete wall in our basement weight room. I challenge them to put a hole in the wall. Okay? Move as explosively as possible. If the intent is there, we're going to get somewhere to connecting that 2.5 to 9.6 meters per second. If the intent is there. Like I talked about, communication is vitally important here. So meet with the coaching staffs that you're working with. It's great because I just have to have meetings with myself for track and field. And there's a lot of internal conflict that goes on. I think I'm crazy half the time, right? But then I've got to meet with a softball coach. I've got to meet with the lacrosse coach, the tennis coach, the golf coach. Figuring out, hey, how do we take what we're doing in the weight room, what I'm doing with your athletes in the weight room, how is that translating? How are you seeing that? You're the master of the sport. Tell me how you're seeing this translate out onto the field or out on the court, right? So again, we're going to revisit KPIs, key performance indicators. What are those? For max strength, for my athletes, especially my males, I know that if you're squatting 2 times your body weight, we're probably good. We're probably good. I don't need to keep hitting that nail for small incremental gains, okay? That's different depending on the sport. So meet with the coaching staff to help determine those. What are the things that they're looking for in their athletes that you can train then in the weight room? Right? I know exactly what the conditioning tests are for each one of the teams that I work with. And when I send out their summer packets, it's to progress them into that conditioning test. So I shouldn't have any of my lacrosse girls showing up in 21 days and failing the conditioning test. They all better pass, or they didn't do the summer workouts. Okay? Long-term, short-term development. Again, those long-term goals are met by short-term development, and the process goals that lead into it. Talk to your coaching staffs about what they're looking to see in there. What's important now? At what times of the season do you want to see your athletes being able to do this? Okay. Considering the tools that you have at your disposal for testing and measurement, for a long time we had stopwatches and tape measures. Okay, and that's how we were able to do all our testing and measuring. Is it most accurate? Is it most efficient? No. I'm still able to give my coaches and my athletes a metric to see if they're improving and see if what we're doing and their efforts are paying off. Versus having unlimited technology and funds. You know, do you have force plates? Do you have bar velocity tracking systems? Do you have GPS systems for all your athletes, whatever that is? And finding ways to be creative with the resources that you have. Okay. And at the end of the day, are these the best practices for the student athlete? We talk all the time. In every staff meeting I've been at Butler, I've been there for 5 years, going into my 6th year. Every staff meeting we've had, I've heard our athletic directors say, student athlete experience. We want to enhance the student athlete experience. Okay, that's the number one goal for us at Butler. And then keep in mind that our weight room metrics don't always translate to on the field performance. Okay. I think we get so caught up in the box of training in the weight room and what can I do on the bar, what can I do with this implement, what can I do with these dumbbells, but we forget to go out and explore. Okay, Vernon Griffin always says go and explore the corners, okay, explore the edges. What are the outliers, what are the reaches of your sport that we can address through different means, okay? Thank you to some of my past coaches and former coaches. And that's my contact information. Again, I'm more than happy to send this PowerPoint to you. If you have any questions for me, that's my email, phone number, and then Twitter and Instagram. Do you guys have any questions right now?
What's your distance in your wickets on your hurdles?
Yeah, so instead of putting a tape measure out there, because that would take forever, I go by shoes. So if I'm doing a turnover-based wicket day where I want the feet moving as fast as possible, I'm going to progress my females, and this is with let's say a 10-meter run-in. Okay, I'm going to progress my females from 4.5 shoes up to 5.5 shoes. I'm a size 11 if that matters. For my guys, I'm going to start at 5.5 shoes and progress to about 6.5 shoes. Okay, the furthest I'll ever get with my females are 6 shoes. The furthest I'll ever get for my males are 5 shoes. So somewhere around, or I'm sorry, 7 shoes. So somewhere around That's going to be like 2.5 meters for my girls and close to 3 meters for my guys. But depending on what the emphasis is, we've done a run in, a wicket, a run out, and another set of wickets at max velocity, so obviously those spacings are different. Anyone else? Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
I just want to remind everyone, so as we break for lunch,